Good evening. One of the changes made prior to implementing the single stream curbside recycling program was the fact that glass would no longer be accepted at the curb. Glass is still accepted at Moscow Recycling, and as a convenience to Moscow residents, the City of Moscow established a second glass drop-off area located at the former Gilbert Auto parking lot on South Blaine and Highway 8 East. The city entered into a lease agreement with Spence Holdings, LLC, who owns the Gilbert Auto property, for access to a piece of that property approximately 50 feet by 50 feet, so we could place a 20 cubic yard roll-off container for a secondary glass deposit. The annual cost of that lease to the city is $3,600. When the City Council approved that initial lease agreement, they requested that staff bring the agreement back for renewal consideration and provide some statistics on usage, which I believe you have in your packet. I have a short recap there. This was also reviewed and recommended by Administrative Committee on July 11th for non-renewal based on lack of usage. In your packet, you have that recap, which shows that the vast majority of the folks that are depositing their glass are still taking it to the recycle center. We only accepted about 6% of the total tonnage in glass at the secondary glass container. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Walter?
Tim, did you tell me that the tonnage of glass is up since we went to
Yes.
single stream and people are not allowed to put it out at the curb anymore?
Yes, it's actually up by 11%, and I have no answer for why.
Jim, this was on the admin meeting on
Yeah, it
July
was
11th.
discussed at the admin, and we talked about how the location of the dumpster at Spence is not really very out in the open, and that may have something to do with the fact that people don't see it as they go by. If it was placed out by Highway 8 and it had a big banner on it, maybe more people would know about it. But the fact that only 6% of the glass is being collected there makes it seem like it's really not worth our while to do that. And people seem to be fine with taking to the recycling center since the amount of tonnage is actually up since we stopped accepting it picking it up at the curb. So it would just seem like the best thing to do to abandon this project because it doesn't really have enough demand to make it worth the amount of money we're spending on it.
John?
I agree with you, Jim. And Spence Hardware has converted the old Ford dealership into a new Cub Cadet Steel franchise, and they are taking up a lot more space than was originally taken up, and they've added trailers and they've added any number of things, and what that's going to do essentially is squeeze out that container. That being the case, I'd make a motion that we don't renew the lease agreement between the City of Moscow and Spence Holdings, LLC.
I would second that.
Okay, Art?
One more small comment. I'm not against terminating the lease there because it's clearly being squeezed out and that chunk of land used for other purposes. But should we ever reestablish a secondary drop-off point for glass recycling, I think we should make a point of better identifying that as a spot to drop it off instead of a dumpster tucked away behind the building where nobody sees it at all. And we would have to make a better effort to let the public know that, yes, this is a place where you can deposit your glass. So in the future, I think it's something that we need to think about more in depth than we did the first time out as part of our learning process.
Walter?
In the same vein as Art talking about, if ever, the container that's at Spence, the opening for the glass is chin high to an adult or higher, and to lift up a full green box, the old curb box full of mayonnaise jars, is something of an effort to not spill them back out on the pavement. The ones down at the recycle center are waist high, much easier to dump into, so just something to think about if we ever decide we really have to have one somewhere else.
Okay, well, we have a motion by John and a second by Jim to deny the renewal lease agreement between the City of Moscow and Spence Hardware LLC. And I'll start the roll with John.
Aye.
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 Okay, so that is denied, so that will save the city $3,600 and our taxpayers, so that's great.